First question is, what are your challenges to teaching body language interpretation skills to law enforcement or military personnel? All right, that's a good one because you got to make sure all of your information is correct. You got to be on your game because if I give someone information that's not up to date, and let's say it's bad or it's wrong, there's something missing from it, it might get them killed. And you think, oh, how could that happen? Believe me, it can happen because they may see something happening and may think, well, this is happening when it's something completely different. Or they may miss something that's happening because nothing was added to that information or corrected on that. So the biggest hurdle to doing that is making sure you get all the information correct. Make sure you give them the right information. It's so important for military and police. I mean, it's of the utmost importance. Don't get me started. It's one of my soapboxes. But when you talk to these people, you'd think, oh, are they paying attention? Are they doing this? Let me tell you something. There's nothing like training police officers or military. They pay attention. They're right there on you the whole time. They won't miss a thing. They will not miss a thing. So when you do that, it's not unnerving to do it, but you've got to be on your game. You've got to look and act professional and everything. So they'll take you seriously and know you know what you're talking about. But I always tell them everything's updated because I'll update it that morning. If I don't do mine until 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, I'll spend the first part of that day going through research to make sure I'm not missing anything. They're the crucial parts. But I'm updating that stuff all the time. But I'll make sure there's nothing that came out that day because I may not get to them for a year or never again be able to talk to them. So I guess that's the hardest part is making sure everything is spot on and real information. Now let's go to number 2. How can nonverbal communication be effectively used in negotiations and conflict resolution? Well, that's basically one of the best things about learning body language is you'll know how somebody feels about what you're talking about. For example, when I'm training entrepreneurs and they go pitch their product or service or whatever it is to whoever they're pitching it to, then they have to know whether that person's there just because somebody said, listen, my sister's kid has got a company and he needs to pitch it. Will you listen to his pitch? And when you go in there, you're not thinking, we may get funded. This is great. You have to know the body language that tells you that person has been sent there just to watch and not engage as far as saying, this sounds good, maybe we'll do it. Because you want to know if you're wasting your time, number one. And number two, you want to take advantage of that time. So my thing is, and what I always do is when I know someone, I tell them, once you realize that's going on, what you want to do is try to keep that person in the room as long as you possibly can. Not because you're being mean to them, because they're going to think, I'll do this right before lunch. You notice a lot of them come up at 11:15. So, well, I got to do lunch at 12. I got a meeting at 12 or whatever. So what you want to do is you want to make them stay as long as you possibly can. At least you can see if you can make them late. Not to be mean, but since you're going in and you've got nothing to lose at all except learning. That's all. That's what's going to happen. It's a learning experience. Once you realize that's happening, you use that as a learning experience. And you use the tools, and we're not going to go over the tools here, but to keep them in the room. One of the couple of the tools you could ask them questions about to explain something is going to take a while. Get them engaged so they get their mind off the clock. That's so important to be able to talk to someone and not manipulate them, but persuade them to stay and make that situation so they have to stay. They can't leave. They feel weird about leaving, even though they're not going to invest, even though they're not there for what you want them to be there for. Now they are there. You want them to be there for a different reason. You want to practice and rehearse on them. Try to keep them in the room as long as you can. So, but that's one thing. And then if you're negotiating, obviously you need to know if someone agrees with what you're talking about. If you're going through a list of things, keep an eye on them, see what they're doing. If you give, let's say, as you go through the list, okay, here's what we're going to cover, this, and this. And when you get to number 8 is so-and-so, and you see one of them go, you see that little lip purse that we talked about before? That lets you know that they may not agree with that. Most likely they don't like that or don't agree with it or whatever. So you keep that in mind. In a couple minutes, you write that down and you'll know when you go into giving things up or holding things back. Well, you don't want to give away number 8 because so-and-so. or it's so important you take number 8 and they don't want it. So you say, okay, we won't make you take number 8, but we'll do this and this. It's how you get leverage in those meetings, in those negotiations. That's just one little thing. But body language is a valuable tool, or understanding body language is a valuable tool in those situations. And knowing if the person you're talking to is the person to be talking to or dealing with in that situation. Have they sent someone in to negotiate with you that's like low on the totem pole? This isn't very important, so we're sending this person in. Or are they higher up on the important scale at the company? Who are they? So you got to do a little research, obviously. But their body language will give up a lot to you. It'll let you understand where they truly stand on all that. Once you understand how to look at that from that perspective. That's a good one, actually. Let's see. Number 3. How does being congruent in verbal and nonverbal communication influence the credibility of a speaker? Well, you're the person that's supposed to be, that's why they've hired you, to be the person with credibility to talk about healthcare, to talk about finances, to talk about body language, to talk about whatever it is you're going to talk about. And you're the person to do that then. One time, my dad was a doctor. I've told you all about this before. And one time I asked him, I said, hey, listen, how when somebody comes in, let's say there's been a kid and he's accidentally stuck his hand in a meat grinder or something, and it's a little kid, and the kid's crying, it's hurting, and how can you go in there and take that little hand and start doing things to it and helping this little child who's in pain, in such horrible pain and agony? And he said, how do you word it? You're the guy. He said, something's wrong. Somebody has to fix it. And you're the person that's going to fix it. You're the guy to fix it. You're the person that's there to fix that. And you'll do it. When that happens, you'll do it because that's why you're there. I never thought of it that way. But that's when they come in, there's a guy that does that or a woman that does that. And that's the guy or woman that's going to do it, the one that shows up. When I was real little, I guess I was 6 or 7. I think it was 6. This is back when storm doors had actual glass in them, And our babysitter had gone somewhere out in the backyard with my sister. And my brother had locked me out of the front door, but I could see him through the glass in the thing there. And I said, if you don't let me in, I'm going to jump through the window. We've been watching Superman and all those kind of things. And he is still messing with me. So I tried to jump through the window. When I did, I got halfway through, but I hit a little thing on the bottom of my arm and hit an artery. So I'm bleeding pretty bad. And it was Libby Keaton. I believe was her name. Was it Libby Keaton? One of the Keaton twins. Yeah. So she wrapped my arm in a towel and ran down to the hospital because the hospital was really close. It's a really small town. My dad's like the only doctor there at the time. So he gets the message. In other words, there's a little kid bleeding to death out here. He's cut his arm. We need you now, in the ER. So he comes in and when he saw me, his face went like that. Then he went, hey, buddy, like that, because he knew the importance of being the guy. And I asked him about that. I said, how do you know how does that work? And he said, in that case, I was the guy. Oh, hang on a second. I had to pause for a second. The dog was barking. Anyway, I'm sure whatever I was talking about, I got it finished. All righty, let's go to 4. I've got to quit saying all the time. How do involuntary physical responses impact the interpretation of body language? Who's writing this stuff? Oh, it sounds like a scientist is asking. Let's see. How do involuntary physical responses impact the interpretation of body language? That's basically body language. That's what you're looking for in interrogations and interviews and everything. You're looking for the involuntary response of a smile or a frown or contempt in micro expressions as you speak with someone or as you ask them questions. So that's really the basics. That's a great question. Didn't mean to make fun of you there for a minute. I wasn't making fun of you, but the wording on some of these is so technical sounding. But That's basically what you're looking for, these involuntary movements, involuntary facial expressions. If someone is, the single shoulder shrug and that chin goes over there, they don't realize they're doing that. They don't realize they're doing a lot of that stuff. But that's the key to understanding what's happening, is knowing or having a pretty good idea what those things mean in general, because there are no absolutes. So just because they do that doesn't mean they're lying. Just because they do that, no, well, that usually does mean contempt, but it doesn't mean they're being deceptive. There are no absolutes. That's another one of my soapboxes I'm always talking about, is there are no absolutes. Just because somebody does this or does something weird doesn't mean they're lying or being deceptive. You have to get these things in groups, in what we call clusters, and you see these clusters of cues, and then you can start making decisions about whether or not they're being honest or being deceptive with you. So that actually is a really good question. And that's basically what you're looking for, is what you're asking about there. Now, 5, can body language cues be accurately read through computer screens or phone screens, i.e. Zoom, FaceTime meetings, Skype, etc.? They sure can, because quite often when you're talking with someone on Zoom, let's say Zoom, I use Zoom all the time, or FaceTime is good too. Your screen is what you're looking for is, like, my hand always comes up. See how huge my hand looks because I put it over there. I can't help it. But when I'm relaxed, I start doing this. So once you get a baseline on me and you see that I'm relaxed, you'll see my hands start moving around, and I'll get all like this. Like if you watch the beginning of some of these videos and then watch to the end, I'll start out like, hey, I'm doing this and that. Then I get relaxed and it looks like something's wrong with me. I'm all hunched down like that. So you can get a great idea of what someone is thinking by how they're behaving. Like you see me when I was drinking coffee. But there was Dr. Phil called once, and he said, hey, there's this guy, Tarek, who lives near Nashville, and I'm going to talk to him on the show, and he's done some things he shouldn't have done. Well, I'm under the impression, or it looks like. And he's being quite, his behavior is in question, in other words. So he said, well, you guys want to come on and talk about it? We said, yeah. And I said, why don't you let us talk to him? Why don't you just let us talk to him? He said, all right, let's do that. So we went on the show, and we were all on Zoom. And Tarek was there in the studio with Dr. Phil. You can see this online. And I think we did it on the behavior panel as well. I think we showed that stuff as well. But go look it up. It's Tarek, Dr. Phil, Terek, I think. And we talked to him that way. And we found out so much by watching before we got there, we got a baseline on him from watching his interview with the producer who was interviewing him before they brought him on the show. We knew a lot about him. We could tell. So we had a pretty good idea whether he had done these things or not. We were all under the impression he had done those things, and we told him that. And in no uncertain terms, go watch it. You'll see. I think they pretty much leave everything in. And Dr. Phil always does. So check that out, and you'll see how important body language is, even on a screen. And we were seeing his thing. We saw him originally on a Zoom call. So he got his body language from just, like here up as he's talking to the producer and answering questions. And she was asking some good questions too. Look that up and see if you can find it. I think that was online as well. I think so. I can't remember if they sent it to us or that was online. But that's where we initially got our information, watching him, So we saw everything, how it looked from here up. Then when we saw him on Zoom, they were showing us the same thing that people would see on TV, pretty much. They do long shots. We could see him sitting there. So we got a whole body shot. We could see his leg jiggling. We could see him move, or see him move back, or see him barely move his legs. When on these things, on Zoom and on TikTok and YouTube, you usually can't see everything. Well, if you're watching a video of somebody talking, you can't see everything. But in that case, we could see a lot of it. So yeah, you can tell a lot. Even if you just have this, you can tell a lot about someone. There have been a couple of interviews that we've done on, let's see, who we talked to. Maybe that wasn't for the behavior panel. But There have been situations where somebody said, "Will you talk to this person and see what you think?" Maybe that's what it is. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do that." Then I'll talk to them and say, and ask the questions that you're supposed to ask. It's not an interrogation. It's just sort of an interview, an investigatory interview, and see how they act, see how they sound, see what they say, see if I'm seeing any of those things like the question before, these involuntary movements that let me know they may be being deceptive, or they may be hiding something, or they may be full of it. So that's the thing with screens like this. They're small, but you can still see a whole lot because there's a lot goes on with hands and the head and the face. You get great information on facial expressions because they're sitting right there in front of a camera. So that's good for that. Now let's go to the next one. Yeah, Lord. How do gender differences affect interpretation of body language cues in professional settings? I talk about this all the time. So for some people, this will be old. We know for a fact that women's brains take in more information than men's brains do in a single setting. Their brains are more powerful than a man's brains. That's my opinion, than man's brain. That's my opinion. I think they're more powerful because they have women's intuition. I think they take in, and we know they take in information differently than the male brain, the female brain does. So the female brain will take in details, a lot of little details, and she will give you a lot of little details, things that don't seem like they're important, but they're all connected. Guys couldn't care any less, even though they're supposed to be focusing on something. They'll get the big things, the basics, those kind of things. And when they relay those or transmit those, it'll be just the basics that way. It won't have all the coloring to it, all the little things that are important as you're transmitting that, in other words. So that's why women make great body language experts, and they're great at reading people because their brains take in more information and more detailed information than a man's does, than a male brain. So there's a book called The Female Brain. Look that up. It's a fantastic book. You can listen to it as well. And that'll set you straight right there. They'll tell you all about it. And we're talking about things like that. There's a book called The Gift of Fear. You want to get that too. They're almost hand in hand. The Gift of Fear talks about why you see something and you don't feel comfortable about it. Women are good at that because their brain takes in information differently than the male brain does. So get those two books, get them. If you don't get any other books this year, get those two. I should be saying, "Oh, get my book because it's a body language book." Get those two books. Those will help you. I think I just winked. Went like that. What's happening to me? Here's number, is that 7? Okay, here's 8. How does body language create trust and rapport in therapy or counseling sessions? In those situations, the therapist, not only are they listening to what you say, they're looking at you and they want to know if you're uncomfortable. It's really important, body language and communication in those therapy sessions, because they're able to look at you from an analytical perspective and have a better understanding of what you're really thinking. You may be saying one thing, but your body may be saying something else, or not saying everything. You may not be adding everything into your answer, and they can see that. I noticed when you're talking about so-and-so, that bothered you. I mean, all you might have done was done like that really quickly for a minute and show like a little bit of the grief muscle up here or concern. So that's really, really important when you're dealing with a therapy situation or a counseling situation. You get a better read on how that person you're talking to, the therapist, can, on how they feel about what they're talking about. And that's the whole thing about you're talking about in therapy most of the time, are your feelings, how you feel about something. So I think it's really helpful in that scenario, in the therapy scenario, because like I said, they'll understand, have a better understanding of what's going on. The therapist will. And the same for the person with watching the therapist. Is the therapist interested? Quite often, they won't look interested because they're thinking, and then sometimes they aren't interested. So you got to know whether that person is thoroughly interested or not in you, as you're doing your therapy stuff. So, or counseling. So that's really, really important from a body language perspective. All right, that was a good one, actually. All righty. How does physical appearance and clothing affect nonverbal communication? How do they help spot body language cues as well as make it harder to spot them? Clothing plays a huge part in behavior in body language. When I was a kid, again, this is another time when I was 6 or 7, lived in the same town, this little town called Louisa, Kentucky. And my mom was, they had Cub Scouts and brownies, and my mom was one of the brownie leaders, one of the people in charge of that. And so I was going to join the Cub Scouts. She said, "You want to join the Cub Scouts?" My brother was too young. So when you joined the Cub Scouts, man, you had to go to Miller's. That was the store you went to get your Cub Scout uniform, right? You got a little hat and you got this little suit to put on. So you look like a little baby cop, basically, except no gun or weapon or anything. And you had this scarf, and this little thing that went with the scarf, so it would stay on your neck and stuff. So it looked really, at that age, you go, wow, this looks pretty cool, man. So I went to 2 meetings and then I quit because I couldn't take it. It was too, not that they weren't very smart or anything. I couldn't stand they were making calendars, and nobody ever said, "Hey man, the most a month's going to have is 31 days. There's not very many months that do that." Nobody ever, I hadn't learned that yet because I was 6 or 7 years old, or however old it is you are when you get in Cub Scouts for the first time. It's the youngest you could be. And when I got my calendar done, the leader guy comes and goes, this thing has 53 day or 52 days on it. There aren't 52 days. And there aren't 52 days in this. I said, "Oh, okay. Well, here's this," and I quit. So I quit. But when I had the suit, when I had the uniform on, back to what we're talking about, man, I had this bicycle. It was this gold one I'd gotten for Christmas. And I was just riding around. I'd put that uniform on and go riding around in front of the house, and I'd be saluting everybody with the Cub Scout salute and stuff. As cars would drive by, I'd just salute them and give them a heads up, "Hey, what's going on?" I'm just cruising around on my bike. I'm a Cub Scout. I thought that was the coolest thing, man. So when you wear some things, it makes you feel cool. It makes you feel like you're the guy, or the girl or the woman, however you say it correctly. And it has a big effect on you, right? Sometimes people can wear the clothes that are so big you can't see what's going on in there. You can't see how their breath rate or how deep their breathing is, or if it's coming from the chest or if it's coming from the abdomen. So some things you got to watch out for. And you can't see as much if they were to do this, depending on how baggy the jacket is. Maybe one of those that's like leather and they're sitting down, but the jacket still goes like that. So some things you can't see depending on what you're wearing. Hats, those usually don't bug me. I like them because if somebody gets heated up, they'll take it off and readjust it because their head's getting hot and they're trying to cool themselves off. Plus the fact people, when they get uncomfortable, they'll adjust things, or they'll pick things off their clothes, or it'll give them something to do and act like they're buttoning something up as they get rid of that built up stress and tension. It can be an adapter. Or they can pull their sleeves down or pull their sleeves up as you're talking to them, and you'll get a better idea of how comfortable or uncomfortable they are from a psychological standpoint. So clothes play a really important part on the psyche and how you feel about things, as well as being able to tell the person watching them from a body language perspective how they're really feeling, what's going on with them. Are they stressed? Are they not stressed? It just helps. It enhances that, I guess you'd say. The bigger the more bulky the clothes you have on, the more they're going to heat up. So if it's a situation where they get hot, they'll pull them off or pull off the jacket or the sweater. That's great. And sometimes if they're just wearing a t-shirt, they may do this a lot because maybe they're getting a little cold, or it's mostly when people cross their arms, it's because it's more comfortable for them. And they or it could be a blocking thing. There's so many things crossed arms could mean, even though people think it means one thing. The person isn't into what you're saying or is not into what's happening. No, it means a whole lot of things. It depends on what's going on in the situation, which brings us to the environment that's happening. If you're watching somebody, or you're talking to someone and you start, even if it's at a party or is it outside, whatever, you got to pay attention to everything going on around that situation. It's not just the person, their body language, it's the outside things that are affecting them. Is there wind happening? Are there people that they're afraid of? Is there somebody they like that they keep looking at? Is there somebody they know but they haven't spoken to yet? They're trying to get their attention, or they're not trying yet, but they're thinking about it. So it's the environment as well affects body language as much as anything else. So you have to keep in mind the environment they're in. If you're in an interrogation room, that's you're going to be acting differently than if you're at lunch, somewhere. So say you're at Hattie B's eating hot chicken with somebody, their body language is going to be a little bit different than they are if they're going to be at Arby's, because it's hot chicken and you're focused on that chicken and how hot it is if you get the hot chicken. If you don't, that's okay. It's okay to be a kid. But so that changes it. Depending, when you're eating something that's really, really hot, a really hot Thai food. There's a place here in Nashville called the Smiling Elephant. Oh man, if you're in Nashville and you want the best Thai food in the whole town, the Smiling Elephant on 8th Avenue. Excellent. And it's the hottest you can get. If you ask for the hottest you can get. It's perfect. And it's all that organic stuff. Awesome. Because the reason I'm focused on that is because every time I eat there with someone, their body language changes. Your body, at first, they sort of shut down a little bit and they get ready for it. Some people get excited. I do, because I know it's going to be good and it's going to be hot. But you can watch people, they're deciding, what do I need to get to drink? Do I need to get a milk, or do I need to get a tea, or what do I need to drink because this is going to be hot? So those are the little things you can notice when you're eating with someone. Those are depending on where you're going. But was there anything else part to that question? Let me make sure I've answered that all the way. Nope, that was pretty much it. Okay. Number 10, what are the ethical considerations in using body language analysis in security or surveillance contexts? To have integrity during that, you just can't pull somebody out because of somebody that looks like somebody you wouldn't like. There was I don't know if this has anything to do with it or not, but my story on that, one time I was in the airport, I was either going to LA or I must have been leaving LA, because this is where this happened. So I'm in line in LA, and then they were sending the dog around. Apparently for some reason they had, and I think it was the drug dog. I don't think it was the bomb dog. And the dog was coming up and he would sniff people's, as they would go through the thing, they'd check them and then they'd walk out in this little space and they'd send a dog out to smell them. Right. So this one guy, his eye, he just like this the whole time. It was so obvious he was carrying something he shouldn't be. And his friend was just whispering. They were whispering back and forth. And he was all panicked. And there were like two people in front of me. And it was hilarious to watch him, because once he got through, he looked at his friend and he went like that and went on through. And he was standing there, and here came the dog. The dog sniffed around and then moved on. And this guy's face, he was like, and he was doing this, I don't know, while he's standing there in the middle and the dog is walking away with this guy. So apparently they weren't after whatever he had in his bag, but it was, he definitely had something he shouldn't have, or was under the impression he shouldn't have. And I would bet everything on that, the way he looked, and as relieved as he looked afterwards, and his friend was going like this, tell him to move on. So I don't know where they were going, but I'll never forget that. And all I would have had to do is tell one of the TSA guys, hey man, your boy there's got something. And it had been over for him. That'd have been me. No, I would never do that. I don't think he had anything dangerous. If he had, he would have looked a lot different than that. But it's funny nonetheless. So if you have any questions about body language, let me know.